Pedro?
All right, no
Be
problem.
safe.
Okay,
Sorry
so-
about your breakfast.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Wash your hands. 7:24. Now let's get Attorney Mike Phillips on the line. Good morning, Mike. Sorry about that. We just kind of got backed up with a bunch of stuff that happened pretty fast. That ended up being like running downhill.
Oh, no problem, Chris. Morning to you, and
Good
I'm
morning.
off to breathe.
So obviously we wanted to bring you on. There was a big win over the end of last week and into the weekend. Chamorro Land Trust lawsuit that was filed by the Department of Justice has been successfully settled. And, we wanted to bring you on because you, along with the Land Trust and the leadership there, as well as, was it Attorney Canto, Mike?
Yes. Jamie was part of the team. At the end, he came back and then basically represented the Attorney General. At the end, before him, there were other attorneys, of course, Ken Orcutt at the beginning, and then Sandra Cruz and Don and others from the AG helped out all along the way. But at the end, Jamie was representing the Attorney General.
Right. And we were talking back in the newsroom about the simplest way to describe how we're able to pull off this win in this Chamorro Land Trust lawsuit. And I guess, Mike, the simplest way to describe it was we took it away from the Land Trust being a race-based program and argued that it was, in reality, what do you call it? A land restoration program.
Yeah, what really happened, in my opinion, Chris, is that in court, and I think those that were there will confirm this. I know the chair of the Land Trust was watching. I know Senator Therese Terlahi was watching, and others. And I think they'll confirm that it was actually us prevailing on the merits. We had argued that the program itself is in fact constitutional. It's consistent with the Organic Act, and we had a judge from Hawaii who really understands these issues because of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act and some of the issues they have out there. So it's, in my opinion, not so much that we changed the complexion, if you want to call it, of the Chamorro Land Trust, but we actually were able to have people that prior to this did not understand it, now understand it. Now, of course, for example, the Department of Justice still preferred to have certain words changed,
right.
And basically, although they were not asking rhetorically, they were saying, well, if it's not this, then you guys shouldn't have a problem with this. And so we negotiated a little bit through that. But, yeah, at the very beginning, when you mentioned the win, the first impression that came to me was, yeah, I was kind of surprised that in the last few days, I was disappointed, the release that came out of the Department of Justice, and then someone from the governor's office was talking about certain problems or implying that just did not exist. With DOJ, it's kind of like I'm not sure what game they were watching, but as far as the way it turned out, I think it was very, very, very favorable to Guam, to the Chamorro people, and to all the residents of Guam. With regard to the role that the Chamorro Land Trust played, obviously it's their leadership, and in particular, Pika Farron was amazing, and I was very, very glad to have the commission as my client. I sued the governor of Guam on behalf, as you remember, of the Chamorro Nation in 1992, and I've been involved with this case since. And I was involved at the very beginning in 2017 when the United States sued Guam to basically end the program. So I've been following very, very closely. And yeah, we haven't really had too many internal problems, but we've had a few. You may remember at that time the governor at that time opposed the implementation, so we basically had to sue our own government in order to implement the program. And with regard to the commission's view, they believe that the settlement is fair, and that the definitions, which we can go over in a second if you'd like, actually broaden and expand and more completely cover all the people that were affected by what happened.
Right, and so Mike,
experience.
Is it accurate to say that there are now, because of this lawsuit, there are now people who can qualify for land trust lots that maybe didn't necessarily qualify before?
Yeah, two things, Chris. There's a lot more people, and number two, it doesn't exclude people that nobody had a rational reason to exclude before. We were excluding military people that were as Chamorros as the rest of us only because they did not receive their citizenship through the Organic Act. And there were other people that on that day that it became effective or during that time period were not on Guam. And the way the Organic Act is written, it only applies to the people that were here. So it was kind of a historic time-based thing as opposed to what should be more accurately the experience under this settlement. It goes back to 1898, and I hope I can simplify this with just
I hope so too.
2 sentences. One, if you had your land taken, you qualify. Number 2, if you're a descendant of anybody that had their land taken between 1898 and 1968 on Guam, you qualify. And so while there's a lot of words and a lot of definitions included in that settlement, that's really what it comes down to. Either your family's land was taken, or you're a descendant of somebody who worked the land, farmed the land, resided on the land. If you have an ancestor that did that, then you qualify.
Mike, is it because I was kind of thinking about this weekend, the same argument that we used to prevail against DOJ with the land trust program. How and I know the ship has sailed or whatever, but why weren't we able to apply a very similar argument to the Davis case? And pardon me, I'm not a lawyer.
Should be one.
But I'm just wondering if we're able to say that, hey, this is land restoration. I think I got you on here.
Well, Davis is different because of the fact that the allegations, for example, in the Chamorro Land Trust, involve a disparate treatment and violation of a statute from the United States, and with Davis, it's more directly related to the Constitution itself, equal protection, and all that. Although
now I feel dumb for asking.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you the difference though is maybe the similarity. The Davis case, depending on who the judge is, depending on where you're at, depending on the time that you're arguing the case, could have turned out very, very different. It's just the time that we live in right now is not very favorable to the Davis matter. But you'll see in different areas of the United States where Mr. Davis would not have prevailed. There's different areas, there's different circuits in the United States that feel very differently.
Right.
And so that adds to the complexity and the confusion, I think, and a lot of people justifiably wondering, hey, that's not really fair. So we live, for example, in the Sixth Circuit, the result would have been totally different than living on Guam. You live on Guam, and Mr. Davis has a view, or there's a view of him that's very different from the view of what he tried to do. If he were living in the Sixth Circuit, he would not have succeeded, and that's unfortunate. But that's the way things are. I also wanted to, Chris, clarify that there was no problem with the commission turning over or receiving assistance from the legislature during this time period. What actually happened was the negotiations continued really up until maybe as recent as March.
Right.
And Attorney Cantor was catching a lot of things that were not going to substantively change the commission's view or how it would affect most of the people on Guam, but there were technical changes that he caught that needed to be made in order to ensure a better and more accurate agreement, and he asserted that, and the United States agreed, and so that caused some delay, and the commission, while we had a meeting, I believe on May 21st, we didn't actually sign the final settlement agreement until May 29th, I think, and or May 28th, and then it was sent to the Attorney General, and so the Attorney General had to sign, and then of course it's discretionary with the governor after that because she's a separate party, and the same is if legislation were to come through, because obviously that everybody understands is the call of the legislature. When it goes to the governor still has the discretion because she's the governor whether to sign or not. So those steps still remain. But yeah, I think there was some implication that the legislature was late or something, and I just want to make sure that's not coming from the commission.
Yeah, I know. That was coming from Carlo Brandt, so that tells you a lot about it.
Very supportive.
Aside from the new eligibility requirements that you mentioned earlier, were there any other changes in this proposed settlement, that opened the door for other people to be eligible to apply?
Yeah, there could be a situation where, and that actually was intended, a situation where we have somebody that was not qualified under the old definition, but, for example, is or should have been qualified because, for example, they were here in 1898 and had property taken, or they were here in 1948 and left for a couple years and had their land taken, and they suffered through the same experience, but under the old law, they were not recognized. They were, quite frankly, ignored, not intentionally, but the statute was patterned after the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which didn't have our experience. So in Hawaii, they didn't worry and therefore left out, just like we did on Guam, military people and others that happened to not be on the island at the time that we were going through this legal, I guess, transformation and experience. And so the act today will include more people, basically, as I said, anybody from 1898 to 1968 that had their land taken by the United States, you now qualify. Or if you're a descendant of such a person, and that definition is also more broad. It now includes anybody that, for example, Chris, if you're a descendant of somebody that didn't actually own the land, because we were able to explain to the United States that that's not really the way we did things here. Right. But if they worked the land, if they resided on the land, and they ranched or farmed the land, now they're qualified.
What about if you have a spouse?
Yeah,
did we
remedy that whole
eligible?
The whole situation that caused the lawsuit?
And yeah, without pointing fingers, I think that if you ask anybody that served on what I'll call Team Guam, they'll tell you that was those facts were so far off. They're borderline made up. I mean, that's just not true. And that did not happen with the commission. There's no basis in fact, and those that participated in the negotiations were, in my opinion, very quickly able to demonstrate and obtain the real facts. That did not happen. And so the idea that there was some race-based this and that did not happen. And it did not, though, become a sticking point. We continued on with the negotiations, but I was relieved to find out that that horrendous story had no basis in fact. Did somebody allege it? Sure, somebody alleged it, but factually, it was not true. It was and you're going to find different opinions. My opinion is very clear. It was all made up, and it was used to malign and discredit the commission, and it's a real shame because it's just not true.
Well, Mike, I mean, I guess just the simplest way to ask is if I had a Chamorro land trust lot and then I married, someone who was not Chamorro or didn't fall into the categories that are because of the victory in the lawsuit that are now widened, and then I died, would my totally not Chamorro other half be able to assume the lease of the land that we have?
I believe, Chris, I don't have to receive a life estate. And along the way, though, I believe that the commission checks at the beginning, and I believe, although I could be wrong with this, that the commission continues to ensure that that qualified applicants are those that are approved.
Right.
But that went on for a while, so I'll be the first to admit I may be confused on that, but I would check and get you an answer to that.
Are we still going to be calling the CLTC the Chamorro Land Trust Commission?
Or are we going to call it the totally not Chamorro in any way Land Trust
See,
Commission?
the same terms and everything. There's a change in terms in one area,
Right.
and I don't think substantively it affects the commission at all.
Right.
There was one concern I remember DOJ having that they wanted to make sure everybody felt that they could apply if they wanted to, and it's one of those things where they ask rhetorically, well, if it's not race based, then why do you guys have a problem with this name change, or why do you guys have a problem with this? And we didn't. I mean, anybody who's followed this case since '92, and you can read my briefs that were filed in '92, will tell you it was never race based. It was based on a political relationship that we had with the United States, a political experience that goes back to when they first came in 1898, and it went all the way through 1950. And so that's what the program is there for. That's what it's based on. Now, in terms of capturing that, using words to better define it, probably than any of us did before, land restoration became kind of the phrase of the day,
right.
And I think easily understood.
Right.
But again, it's not because we changed the commission or the act. It's because we changed the minds of people that earlier didn't understand what was going on.
So no need to change the name.
Allegation.
So the name hasn't changed.
Right.
I beg your pardon?
So we're not changing it from Chamorro Land Trust.
No, absolutely.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
okay.
No, not at all. And
Because I was wondering if all my Chamorro Land Trust shirts were going to go up in value.
yeah.
They're going to become like the new PUAG shirt.
Is there any time frame that the court set for this to be changed by the legislature or adopted by the legislature?
Well, it wasn't the court, but the parties agreed that 1 year they thought would be fair. So
Yeah.
we included 1 year. And again, with the legislature and with the governor, they're separate entities, and they're separate parties. Neither one is sued here, and so it's kind of like me saying I'll forward a document to Chris and Bree, but you guys aren't obligated to or forced in any way, or quite frankly, in our litigation, you're not expected.
Right.
It's a hope, and everybody's committed to try and for example lobby with the legislature for their support, but they're independent, and so is the governor, and so they really have the it's not a luxury, but they have the discretion that's provided to them through the Organic Act to make an independent decision. Obviously, the commission supports that settlement because we believe it's in the best interest of the people of Guam. But both the Department of Justice and the commission went out of their way to make sure that neither the legislature, at least in my opinion, and nor the governor felt that we were negotiating and not allowing them to make their independent decisions.
Right.
We recognize that they've got to make their independent decisions and look at the document on their own.
Right, Mike, that's why we wanted to bring you on. Actually, I wanted to bring you on because I saw that the release out of the governor's office about this lawsuit win mentioned everybody but you.
Yeah, you know how it goes, right, Chris?
I was like, wait a minute, they mentioned the AG's office, they mentioned the land trust, they mentioned the dog.
Yeah.
But they didn't mention Mike Phillips, so I just wanted to bring you on.
I don't get to say it enough, but and it may not be popular, but when this started in 2017, the four people that came together were former General Anderson, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, and Senator Therese Terlai, Pika, the chair, Pika Farron, the chair of the commission, and Governor Eddie Calvo. And they were the four that got together and made the decision that I could represent the commission.
Right.
And I'm very grateful to them for this opportunity. And yeah, whether they mention my name or not, you know what was disappointing, Chris, really, you know, whether you believe it or not, wasn't that. It was the idea that I was listening to a release and it sounded like, well, geez, what game were you watching? Because what I participated in, we won.
Yeah.
And what I participated in, we were very satisfied.
No, and I'm assuming that you're talking about the policy director, Carlo Branch, had made a statement, I think, to a few island media, maybe on Friday. That's what you're talking about? And he basically implied that we didn't win until the legislature, you know, amends the rules and regs. What I thought was so funny about that, Mike, was that just a few hours ago, Adelup put out a release that said this is a great day for Guam and it's a huge win. And then a few hours after that, you get the policy director who, like, Adelup has a big problem with, you know, Senator Therese Terlahi getting any shine at all. I mean, I don't know what it is. Obviously, it's looking very personal. But yeah, a few hours after they said, Mike, a few hours after they said this is a great day for Guam, they said, oh yeah, but it's not a done deal. So, I mean, you know, that was in one ear, out the other, frankly.
That was the part that was concerning. You know, when it came out of the Department of Justice, while it bothered me, I wasn't surprised because it's DOJ, and you know they're going to say, it wasn't really a big win for you guys. But you know, that's what everybody on the other side says when they don't do as well. Is it expected? I wouldn't say it's expected, but it didn't bother me as much as our own people saying, hey, you know, this isn't really what it is. And like, of course it is. It's a huge win, and everybody that I know that needed to do work and do their parts did so. And yeah, I don't think it's proper to take anything away from anybody. Anybody who watched the legislature, I think, would have seen they were very supportive. July was definitely somebody that.
Well, maybe Adelup doesn't watch the legislature. Like, maybe they don't watch the legislature. Hey, but we got to run. I got
Okay. Thanks so much, you guys. Any other questions, you let me know, and I'll get back to you on those particulars, Chris, because I want to make sure that you guys get the whole, get the whole settlement clear.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, guys.
Wash your hands. Okay. Right on. 747. Let's keep it and on the phones and go over to Zita Pangilinan of the Hadza Foundation. Hi, good morning, Zita.
Good morning, Chris.
Also, of course, Chris and Briere, we wanted to get you